Hey guys, I'm Dani Castellano, and this is Diet Culture. Nick is with me today, and we are talking in the second part of our spooky season series, Why Diet Culture is Spooky, about Fatphobia. To really get in there and define like what this word that we use all the time means, how it's impactful, and a lot of examples of what we can each do as individuals to make a change with this and to ask for change once you've already started to challenge and unlearn some of these things. So can't wait for you to give it a listen. Hey Nick.
Hey Dan, how's it going?
Good. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm exhausted, really tired. Had a long shoot today in DC, but it's good. We got a couch finally. Had a bad experience recently where we only got half of a sectional that we ordered, so we got a new one because I lost that other half. But
What did you do with the half?
I don't know. I think we're gonna have to take it to the dump because
Boo.
I know it's really tragic because I was like when I wanted to buy a couch, we were really trying to buy one that was like I was trying to recycle someone else's couch, and now I have destroyed one in the process of trying to find one. So, like, absolutely the worst thing that could have happened in terms of me respecting the earth.
Well, I guess where you live, you can't just put it out on the street.
Well, no, and the other thing is, it's like it's alarmingly one half of a like missing the armchair on the other half, and they wouldn't source us just a part to like so
Oh, gosh.
yeah. So
Okay. Well, I've been thoroughly Mondayed today, but I'm happy to be recording this episode. Yesterday, I officially published the Diet Culture website. So you can find that at dietculture.squarespace.com because
awesome.
I made it with Squarespace. But right now, it's kind of some bare bones, but all the episodes are there with the descriptions. And I have some goals for the things I want to continue adding to make the website a little bit more detailed and its own experience. But I was excited to get it up and off the ground. Today, we're diving into the second part of why diet culture is spooky with talking about fatphobia, which is truly a terrifying systemic oppression. And I want to get into, first of all, like what it is. I know we've talked about this a little bit, and it's a word I use often. But common sense can probably tell you phobia being part of the word. This one's pretty straightforward that it would be a fear or hatred of fat bodies. And I would venture to say that many people have like a sense to not say like I'm fat phobic, like I don't fear or hate fat bodies. Like many people will probably say that. So this becomes really tricky, I think, just like with any privilege that someone may hold. It's really hard to want to address where you may have some kind of contribution to this overall, even if you've never blatantly said anything about someone in a larger body, which I bet you isn't very many people, because this is a really, really, really intensely ingrained issue. So even if you would say, oh no, I don't like fear or hate fat bodies, the actions that we take as a society and the way that we talk about our own bodies, let alone the bodies of others, really enforces that we think that. And I'm going to give a few examples here in a little bit to go through, but just thinking about how clothing, chairs that you see in any kind of like commercial setting, whether that be a doctor's office, like just your regular standard waiting room,
Restaurants,
or restaurants, an airplane.
those are an egregious offense, but yeah.
Yeah. and a lot of equipment in general that human bodies need to
Cars.
utilize. Yeah, cars are mostly designed for thin, or some people like to refer to thinner bodies as straight-sized people. Um,
What is I'm sorry, I haven't, can you
straight
enlighten me?
size. So, uh, let me actually like pull that up because it's a term I've been hearing a little bit more often. In, I think it might be referring to someone who's like wouldn't be oppressed for their body size, but they wouldn't necessarily have a thin body. But let's see. Okay, so, ooh, this is interesting. Something maybe I need to educate myself a little bit further on um, before using that term. But apparently, it refers to someone who's quote unquote not fat or a size US 10 or below.
That
So
seems really
apparently,
specific.
it's been adopted by some professionals in an attempt to be inclusive and Hayes aligned and social justice oriented. But this writer, who's from Side by Side Nutrition, um, which is just a group of dietitians I really like. They're actually near me out here in Colorado. But yeah, it really does. They're talking about in this article how it drips of heteronormativity and equates like heterosexuality and straightness with thinness or normalness. So yeah, I could see where that would be a problematic term. Okay,
Gotcha.
well, we learn as we go there. So anyway, designed for people who are not in larger bodies, essentially, is like if you look around in all those examples that we were just given. Um, and that to me is such a blatant example of how our society reinforces this idea, even though many people probably wouldn't say that they have a fear of these bodies. So then, how we talk about ourselves, I think that is where there's a lot more of that fear that comes into play. Oftentimes, when I'm working with my, like going through an assessment with a new patient, I will ask if there's a like a goal weight someone has and they may not have one. And mind you, this is not because I'm trying to help someone achieve this weight per se. It's just to understand someone's thought processes about their body. But if I ask if they have a fear weight, there's almost always a number that someone has in their mind of like that would be an unacceptable amount to weigh. And I think that's the like internalized fat
Interesting.
phobia. Like we are clearly associating larger bodies with being wrong. Um, and like in addition to this being a social injustice, it also is so wrapped up in health, and it's for pretty nonsensical reasons. That's why I'm so passionate about talking about it and working on dismantling it. Because one, yes, I care about other people, but also it doesn't scientifically make sense. So there's like more and more reasons that pile up, and it would be enough even if it was just for social like equality. But that's where a lot of arguments get made of like, oh, but this person's unhealthy. And that's just not like an inherent truth. So I think they're both really important to talk about. And I will certainly like put that disclaimer out here that I am someone who exists within privilege. And again, I'd never say that because I think that I am better because of it, but there is a privilege that exists from that. And in my platforms and in the work that I do, I think it's important to talk about it because it is a oppressive system that needs to be dismantled for a lot of reasons, and it's really at the base of a lot of the issues with diet culture. and people really having true access to being well and being treated appropriately in our society. Um, okay, so Nick pointed out last episode that we should really make a point to like offer ways to promote change within this whole conversation because it's great to talk about it, but like, okay, education is a great thing, like get the conversation going, but also what can you do about it? So, the first two things that came to my mind in addressing just like in society how um, clothes and chairs and equipment are designed for thinner individuals and really exclusive of people in larger bodies. One thing is asking your workplace to make a change. You could certainly ask if it's a business that you frequent or have any affiliation with, you could ask them too, but thinking of just like making changes within your workplace, especially if you're someone who is a healthcare provider. And I can tell you from personal experience that pushback may come in the form of someone not wanting to spend money on things like this, but this is a hard thing for someone to say no to because it's so blatantly obvious that it's unacceptable to ever have seating. If anyone has ever walked in your business that doesn't comfortably fit in a chair, that's extremely stigmatizing and inappropriate. And I think it's a good thing to push for. I've personally had semi success in this area, but I don't stop the conversation about it until something changes because that is just one way to create a safer space, especially in healthcare, to make sure that someone can sit down and feel comfortable and like they belong in a space.
Yeah, I just want to say real quick, like I did this, helped out with this project for I don't know if it's a nonprofit, but I assuming so. It was Melwood, and they help match people with disabilities to jobs and try to combat that. But anyways, one of the things they were talking about that I gleaned that I thought was really interesting was she's saying like when you put I think they're called sidewalk cuts, like curb cuts. I think what they were calling them, where it's the curb flattens out to be level with the ground, and then it's a ramp.
Yeah,
She was talking about like that is a big issue. There's not enough of them.
like accessibility for someone in a wheelchair.
Yeah, but then she was
Yeah.
saying like, but then when you put those in, the mailmen all are like, "Oh, thank you, because this makes our job easier too." And then like, so she was saying like, one of the points she was making is it's not just like a lot of people take this opinion where they go, "Oh, that's everything's affirmative, right? Like everything's like an affirmative action where you're
Yeah.
like redoing things." It's like,
Yeah.
no, you're actually like, you I mean, you're kind of redoing things, but you also sort of can reinvent the way you look at things, and like there are so many other options. Like, do you really need like a chair and a table? That's it. That's all you can do. Like, think of something else. Like there are so many different options that can be inclusive to
Mhm.
everyone, you know? And
Yeah.
so
And I
not
think
yeah.
oh, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, yeah, not viewing it as some sort of like affirmative action or some like we have to, because people just get so like butthurt about like, oh, now we have to rebuild all of this. Now we have to redo, you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah,
that's a very
that's
common
true.
response to a lot of this stuff. And
Yeah,
so
you're
like
right.
a response to that is like, well, we have tables and chairs because we thought they were the best means of sitting and eating. Like,
Mhm.
so we made all this ourselves. We designed it. So let's design elsewhere, and with like you're designing with inclusivity in mind. You're not like, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, I mean, we want things to evolve when it's convenient for us, but find an annoyance when it's something that requires you to, one, think about something you may have been ignoring, which I think is a big part of privileges in general, is just like coming to terms with the fact that it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. But if you have these things brought to your attention and then you continue to ignore them, like, you know,
yeah. I mean,
that's
I think
not
it's
great.
Yeah, I think it's like a beautiful thing because then you have like a lot of people will be like, "Oh, there's nothing. I've done all I can do." Like they take this like stance on
Mhm.
life where they're like, I don't know, like bored or whatever, but it's like really like so much to fight for, like every corner,
Yeah,
around
we should
every corner.
always
So
be seeking that change. And change is uncomfortable, but I think we have to question, why is this change uncomfortable for you? And in this situation, it would be like challenging the thoughts and opinions that you have about body size by saying that it's necessary to expand on the types of furniture that are available for people to be more comfortable in. Another assignment or activity you could do is writing to companies about the harm of like lack of inclusivity and sizing. I personally have written to clothing companies in situations where someone I care about was being impacted by the lack of size diversity. And I got responses with some action items, and Target specifically responded to me, which I did not like think anyone from Target would respond to my email, but um, they said that they were working on some things, and I can't speak to if it's been fixed exactly because, like I said, I'm not struggling to find my size when I walk into Target. However, I have noticed an expansion on the sizes offered, at least in some of the Targets that I go to. So I at first thought like, oh, they're just going to say whatever, but it actually does seem like they're trying to make a difference. And that's where I think this is really tricky because we've talked about this briefly of like, it needs to come from a genuine place to really make a difference, because otherwise it's not going to land very well if someone's just doing it because they think that's the like politically correct thing to do. So I don't know like Target's true philosophy on these things other than that they're a business and they're trying to make money. But I do find that hopeful that like even getting a response of like, hey, if enough people bring something like this to people's attention, like that's how we can create change. And any business that has an email, like you may or may not get a response, but you can reach out and like just ask them for better. And that's something that we can do to be promoting change, because I really don't think it's someone in a larger body's responsibility to have to ask for these things, because like they're the ones already dealing with that. And I think it's people that have the privilege, like that's my opinion, is that that's like our job to make those things change,
yeah,
because that person didn't do anything wrong by having a different size body. That is just how their body is, and they're a human being just like the rest of us. So there's no you shouldn't have to ask for that equal treatment
yeah,
or equitable treatment.
correct. Yeah, and I was just gonna say like, you were just saying that like they did nothing wrong, and I was just gonna say like they're anti-normal, and so like and you were saying like you can't. I do genuinely believe that the opinion, like most things, like reflect the opinions of the masses
Yeah.
like pretty well, and so like all of this, I think it reflects. Obviously, we talk about it every week, like spot on. It's that's the normal opinion, and so like
Mhm.
the normal has to change. You know what I'm saying? Like,
And that's why, like, I care about these action items, because having the conversation is wonderful, and, like, raising awareness on this is wonderful, and, like, I find that to be a huge part of why this podcast is important to me, but also, like, reminding each other that you have to take steps. You have to learn first, but, like, taking steps, if you're already familiar with these things and you listen to this podcast, like, what are you doing to affect change? And that is really like with this series, like this shit is scary because it is hurtful to people, and not just in like a boo-hoo, their feelings are hurt. Like this is a systemic oppression, and we have, if you have any desire to, like, we have an opportunity to fight for change. And I'm certainly not gonna have provided thorough lists of things. Like, there's a lot of other things people can do, but these are just the things that, like, boom, come to my mind that are actually relatively easy to do. Okay, so weight is always brought into the conversation about health. This starts at infancy. Like, I remember my time at WIC and telling parents, like, oh, maybe you should cut back on the formula for your baby, which is really, really cringy and upsetting that I ever was encouraged to say things like that and like believed it at the time. Um, so we're taught that weighing too much, quote unquote, is detrimental to health. So, for one thing, there's actually a lot of evidence that shows that um, holding more weight on your body is a protective mechanism for health, and that people in larger bodies actually may live longer. So it's really interesting because that conflicts with the whole idea of like the quote unquote obesity epidemic, and people are dying, and it's this, horrible thing. Um, and we don't talk about systemic and internalized fat phobia being an epidemic that is harmful to people. But there's evidence on the contrary of all of that, which makes it really interesting to battle, because that's the case with a lot of like articles that you're going to come across, which tells us that we don't just have one end of the story. And so it's really important to educate yourself. So the other thing is that most people will regain the weight they've lost through restrictive patterns. So like dieting of some sort, or changing exercise habits of some in a way that's really dramatic. This doesn't mean that you should like try and follow a like quote unquote non-diet diet like Noom. That's not my point, about it being restrictive. It's just that we don't have a way to make bodies lose weight and keep that weight off, which is very telling, that maybe we should stop trying to do that so much. But in my preparation for this episode, I came across, I don't even know how I always do this. I have no idea how I get into these places. I go down these rabbit holes, but it was an article from Good Housekeeping, and they were talking about like weight stigma and why like diets don't work. But then they have this like quote in there. So it says, for anyone who's reading this article and saying, but what about Rebel Wilson, Adele, or Jennifer Hudson? How did the guy Matt from college drop 50 pounds and keep it off for years? For more than 20 years, the National Weight Control Registry has tracked more than 10,000 people who have beaten the odds and maintained a weight loss of more than 30 pounds for at least 1 year, and found that they do it with consistent vigilance, says this Dr. Apovian. This is actually like a pretty harmful piece of content to be kept in there, because then what this article goes on to say is that like, but it's not like a sustainable way to like live your life, blah, blah, blah. But really, this reinforces the whole one of the big problems with our diet culture, that if you're disciplined enough, which is like if they do it with constant vigilance, that to me is screaming discipline, which is like such a garbage thing to say about someone's body being a certain way, if they don't already have thin privilege. Because if your body is never going to be in a larger body because like you have a set point that is a certain way and you are a thinner person and you spend a lot of time doing something, you may get a certain physical result that then tells you, oh, like if people would just be more disciplined, they could all look like me. But it doesn't work like that. And also, tracking if someone like lost weight for a year is not good information for the National Weight Control Registry. This, I've said it before and I will say it again. This is absolute garbage, and it's constantly used by people who are trying to make the point that, oh, you can keep the weight off. No one is saying that no person ever has lost weight and like maintained that. But the amount of yo-yo dieting and weight cycling that causes like Weight Watchers to have to revamp their program 30,000 times since its inception. Um like hello. It doesn't work. And it's not because people aren't vigilant. It's because their body is fighting against them because this isn't supposed to be this way. Especially when you overcorrect and do something extremely restrictive, which is what we're taught to do. Like that's not sound advice. So, no one is saying that there are not people in larger bodies who are struggling with health conditions, because there are always going to be somebody in any article like this that's commenting like adipose tissue, which is, for anyone who doesn't know what that means, body fat, causes inflammation and blah 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 blah, and it's harmful. And first of all, it's not that person's business to like talk about someone else's existence causing themselves harm in that way. Like, there's a lot of things that are harmful, and like it's not like anyone's job to insert themselves and be like, that person is killing themselves. Like, I just think that that's a random tangent, but I think that's a pretty useless way for us to use like technology. But a lot of internet trolls spend a lot of their time doing things like that. But the problem with the view that we have about larger bodies and health is that weight stigma and shaming actually leads to adverse health effects, and weight cycling is dangerous to health. In addition to anything that someone's body may be contributing. So I think the thing that we get lost in is that it's not really about their body size. So I got to be careful with the way that I worded that, because independent of weight loss, if someone changes lifestyle or like their circumstances change, like we've talked about how many things in our society impact someone. Like if your circumstances change, that could also cause someone's health to improve. And that's really independent of whether or not they've lost any weight. Because when we talk about someone getting healthy, quote unquote, most people, from just like my observation, I don't have a statistic on this, but what I've noticed is people are referring to weight loss. And that's not necessary, but having a healthy relationship with body, food, and exercise supports health. And we know that, which is why intuitive eating is so incredible and the research that has come out of that. But you're not automatically unhealthy by being overweight. This is mythological. It's something we're taught. And like we were saying a few minutes ago, like there's a lot of things that we thought we knew and understood that are going to change with time. And it's unacceptable, really, that we didn't know it before. But when we find that out, we can make a change and do it differently. And this speaks so heavily to me as a healthcare provider and like the work that I've personally done. I'm not trying to toot my own horn over here, but like to unlearn some of this stuff so that I'm not perpetuating harm on people and reinforcing the weight stigma and shame about someone's body size, because that's how I was popped out of my program in dietetics. And when I say this, like, you're not automatically unhealthy by being overweight, I want like people to sit with that, because that's not just me saying that, oh, some people, like, it doesn't mean that, like, I'm not trying to play devil's advocate, but like, it really isn't as simple as we've declared it to be. And it's so crucial to tease apart like why that is, and like where you've gotten this information from. Because the definitions of quote unquote overweight or obesity, or I freaking hate saying this, but morbid obesity, um, those definitions are really limited because we measure them based on BMI, which is the body mass index, which measures like height and weight and has a amount you should be that you should weigh for your height. And it is not a useful tool. It was not actually created on any kind of scientific evidence that was meant to help people. And furthermore, it's used as like those words are used as a descriptive word, which is super subjective and really fucked up in ways to describe a person's body. Because I have heard people use these terms, and I know for sure that they don't know what this person's actual like BMI, like that's not what they're saying. They're looking at a body size and describing them with these words. And like the BMI does not account for anything other than height and weight. And it was based off of white people, which is extremely problematic because not everyone's body is meant to be the same. And even within the white person population, there are many factors that could impact someone's frame, their muscle mass, all those things that would impact, because there are athletes that may be technically overweight based on their weight for their height because of the amount of muscle mass that they have. And it's like that's completely garbage to like give that person a free pass and then we just use that word for others, because you can't look at someone's body and know anything about their health other than like there's probably some outward signs like someone's face when they're about to pass out. Like there are a few things that you would be able to glean and that healthcare providers could glean from the outside of someone's body, but not about their size. That doesn't tell you anything. Okay. Getting really fired up over here. I'm feeling feisty. So really what I want to say about this is do some unlearning. There are a lot of really great books, and the book, I've mentioned this on here before, but the book written by Sabrina Strings, Nick and I read this with our mom actually at the beginning of last year, but the Fearing the Black Body, the Racial Origins of Fatphobia, extremely well written and gives a lot of insight into where some of this stuff came from in the first place. I really highly recommend this book. And also just like looking into more about where BMI came from and why it's not helpful. Because we really need to stop using that. Insurance cares about it. Insurance cares about it even within eating disorders. And it's really extremely frustrating because of how treatment is payment for treatment can be impacted based on someone's body size, even if they're struggling with the same behaviors and level of severity of illness as someone in a thinner body. And this it impacts people's ability to get access to certain procedures. Like it really impacts a lot as far as people being able to access healthcare. And it's so arbitrary and really truly useless. So my advice is that unlearn, and then unless you're giving details for a police sketch to catch a criminal, you could make an active effort to spend less time describing other people's body sizes. Like if that is something that you like catch yourself doing, try not to. Like bring awareness to that and like why you feel the need to describe someone's body size. Like what are we getting at with that? Anything that you would add?
To that specific note, Just make sure you practice some descriptive terms for people, that so you can still describe people, but not with obscene and offensive language, but like arm yourself with words that are acceptable to use and non-offensive. That's what makes them acceptable to use for describing all types of bodies.
Yeah, and like fat is not a bad word. Not everyone in a larger body, just from conversations I've had, feels comfortable with that. Some people totally want to own it, and like take back the fact that it doesn't hold any moral value to be thin or to be fat. Um, but I find it interesting. Like, I think we typically describe people like if we were trying to point someone out, like it was that person who's a little bit bigger. Like, what else are you noticing about this human being? Like, did they have any kind of like energy they brought into the room with them? Like, were they wearing something interesting? Like, why don't we pay attention to other things about people than their body size? And that's part of like what I'm getting at is like, who cares? Why are we doing that and bringing attention to it? Unless someone wants to have attention brought to it because they're trying to reclaim something that never should have been taken away. Okay, so I thought of a couple of things that I've just heard recently, and like I want to talk about some ways we could diffuse the situation. So, or like why it's harmful, just to bring some awareness. So, someone saying, I thought I was fat back then, but I would give anything to be that thin again. So, I have heard this from a countless number of specifically women's mouths, that like first of all, this tells us that body image and insecurities don't fix themselves based on the size of your body, because this would be like someone looking back at a picture of themselves oftentimes when they're younger, because that's the past, but like our bodies aren't meant to stay the same forever, for one. But like remembering insecurities that you had at that time about your body, and then like making a comment that you would give anything to be that size again. One, that's harmful because talking about your body in that way is not helpful to your mental well-being. You have not become less of a human because of that. You haven't let yourself go. Like that's a complete societal construct to honestly mostly make money and have people stay in a line that they think can distract them from bigger things. But like to say that, and someone be near you whose body is larger than yours, you're reinforcing that you value thinness very greatly, so greatly that you want to talk about it in this way, which is honestly just annoying to me, with where I'm at and the work that I do with eating disorders. I find this just extremely annoying. I don't think anyone that does this is a bad person at all. I do want to say that because everyone's on their own like part of their journey, but just bringing awareness to the way we talk about ourselves. We can say we don't care about other people, but it really does reinforce those ideas to someone else. And everyone's insecurities are sure their own thing to grapple with, but this isn't about insecurity. This is about a social and like systemic injustice with discrimination against body sizes. Okay, so another one I encountered really recently was, have you seen Adele lately? She looks so good. And I think in that situation, I just nodded because I was really taken aback by the conversation started with her releasing new music. And I was like, oh my God, like this really just turned into her body being talked about. Like, I literally can't say anything because I'm not going to like say, yeah, she looks good. Cause, like, first of all, I think Adele looks great however Adele wants to look, and I could care less what she looks like. I like her music a lot, and that's what I value about Adele, not her body. I don't think it's inspiring that she lost weight. I think it's honestly none of our business um, what her body looks like. Um, but that in that way, saying nothing felt like the most powerful thing to say. But I think in that moment, I was with somebody that I didn't want to risk offending because it's someone I don't know super well. And they were providing a service for me that I would like to have provided in the future. And I didn't want to cause anything negative to happen in that. I've actually thought about it a lot since then. But I think like reinforcing like that just I could have said I don't really care what Adele looks like. I just think her musical talent is incredible and I'm really excited for her new album to come out. And I think that would have like made the point without it being something where it felt confrontational or like I was putting that person down for saying that thing, but just really making a point that like I don't care. And then hopefully like why do you care so much? It like creates that space for someone to think about why they said that in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, I do think if you, yeah, those are good ones that can push a mild level of uncomfortability into an opposing viewpoint and make that opposing viewpoint be examined a little more.
Mm-hmm.
I have some as well. If
Okay.
you, um, so so I did like a little research and looked up a few, and like one of the ways of deflecting, and I'm gonna explain all these, but one of the ways of deflecting that I found on the internet was leaving promptly, exiting the situation, and I think that is for I would say like that is a very like you know these responses definitely vary on your level of trauma related to this dialogue, this language. So like that's an option for
Mm-hmm.
people. Um, and then another one was repeating what they said, and this would be, I think this is for a different level of trauma, would be repeating what they said and asking them to like state it again, and kind of like that again, kind of like what Danielle was saying with forced reexamination of the thought. So what did you say? Like, excuse me? That kind of thing where you kind of inflect a little bit of like that offended me. Um, and
Or
then
that was just like offensive in general, because that's something that I've used like with my patients in my time of working with healing relationship with food and eating disorders is like if you say something that's just like so out of left field and really is it reinforcing a harmful narrative, like if you put that in sometimes like if anyone has ever had any history of examining any of this, even if they're not there yet, I think it's pretty evident by doing that that, like, let's think about that for a second. And if you're in a safe environment, like in a safe relationship with that person, I think it's going to be received that way versus someone you don't know may not pick up on that. So that's where you just like Nick saying you have to kind of like judge a little bit. But if it's someone I would say most people want to be like not corrected, but challenged for being better. Um, it's how we're approached, but a lot of people are actually really open to that. So like posing that can be such a great way to just like gently like you're saying encourage the person to think about it on their own. You don't even have to tell them because that's like a really cool part of being a human is that way we can communicate and be like, what was that?
um, another one is like find and know your allies in the situation.
Mm.
Oftentimes, like in my instances where these things happen, I'm so often in a group setting, and I do think that group settings are the best place to kind of throw something out there, because like Danielle was saying, if it's a one-on-one, like there are some times where it's just like, I don't want to make this unsafe for myself,
Mhm.
which is understandable. So group setting, know your ally, and understand like their stance, and then like you can have a comment back and forth with them once something is said like that. Share a look with them, have a comment with that ally,
Mhm.
and then I think that oftentimes does become a theatrical display as well, and is received by the person again in that sort of like make you think way. Um, and then my last one, my specific one, because what I talked about with Danielle is being uh, me, a person with thin privilege, and also someone who's trying to head on a demolish Fatphobia. I want to like push as hard as I can. So one of the comment, and again, like Danielle was saying, they just like oftentimes I'm literally, it just like shatters my world, and I'm like a horror movie victim where I'm just watching because I'm like I literally couldn't have seen this coming in any reality. I simulated in my head you saying something that's that obscenely offensive right in this professional workplace. But, anyways, so one of the comments that spawned this dialogue from me to Danielle was, and I work in media production, so I'm often in instances where I'm behind cameras, but I work in media production, not like Hollywood production. So the people in front of the camera are often uh, lay people, and so they are not professional actors, and so they are very aware of everything going on, and they'll make lots of comments about it, talk about it. But anyways, one of the people I was filming walked behind the camera, looked at the monitor, and then just said, just wanted to make sure I didn't look chunky, which I thought was very offensive. And I was so taken aback that I just like, I got like sad about it, and my eyes shot to the ground, and I just like moped away. But now the thing that I have armed myself for being behind the camera, something else I found on the internet, was inflict a little sass if you want to, and embrace the pushback. So my thing would be, sorry, actually, no, all of our cameras come non-fatphobic certified, so you're good. Like I'm gonna try and push that one in there next time. Our cameras are non-fatphobic, or our cameras are free of fatphobia, so impossible. And then move on. Something
Oh
where
my
like
god. That
I
is so good.
I think stuff like that is really good because then it pushes that like, oh wow, you actually have thought about this
Yep.
thing, where
Yeah.
it's like, and that so often is like, that is such a good like wake up call for people, like, oh my gosh, the point you just made was good. So like,
Yeah, and that's actually so helpful for, like, all of the situations where someone is sees themselves in a photograph that you may take, like, with people you're with, that make comments like that about themselves, like, that's such a great line.
thank you. So that's the one I'm gonna try to. I feel like it will only be a matter of weeks until that one. I'll bring it up when I use it because it will happen for sure.
Yeah, no, I think that's, like, super useful, and yeah, I like if you feel ready to lay the sass down, like, that's a good one. Do you, can you, shoot me over the sources of some of these? Because there are some really great articles of some of these suggestions. I think that would be nice to link in the show notes.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Okay, so in summary, how can I challenge my internalized fat phobia? Recognize you have something to unlearn. Think about your belief about bodies and where you got this information from that shapes your beliefs. Look into some alternative sources of this information to broaden your horizon around what you think you know about this. And think about the humanity of it. Like, remembering that all bodies are a human being inside and do not deserve less treatment because of what they look like. There's a lot of trolling on the internet that is so cruel and unacceptable. And obviously, it's easier for people to hide behind a platform or like some kind of anonymous random account and perpetuate this. But realizing like that does matter, like these words do matter, and it's completely unacceptable and something that we actually can all take action to change, for things to be better, for people to have access to healthcare and to just like do things that other people can do without feeling like they're at fault for not being able to participate, or to gain access to those things. Any other words? I feel like I'm not being super eloquent with this because I'm just like, I think I've said mostly what I wanted to say. I'm irritated, and I just like really feel so strongly like that we can make a change, but it's going to take like everyone has to participate.
Yeah. Also, yeah. Specifically about that thing about the internet trolls and stuff. Definitely that is its own epidemic. Is like why that empowers people so much. That
Yeah.
once they don't have the like alleged consequence of like I don't know being attacked, be it verbally or physically back, they can just spew anything, and oftentimes not even like I don't know if that's even your belief or not. You're just like doing it to do it
Hmm.
sometimes, but obviously don't do that and examine yourself if you are a person who quote unquote hides behind a keyboard. That is the like statement that is used to identify that behavior. But yeah, just silly. Golden rule still holds up really good.
Yeah. A human is a human is a human. So let's remember that. So thank you guys for listening to the second part of our spooky season theme series about why diet culture is spooky. I'll say it again just because I'm excited that the website for Diet Culture podcast is launched, and that is dietculture.squarespace.com. We would super appreciate ratings and reviews, specifically on Apple. To my knowledge, I don't think you can do that on Spotify, but subscribing on any platform is great. Feedback I want to hear via email, which you can now do through my website. Also direct messages on Instagram. My handle is at dietitian Dani Cast. I want to hear from you guys. I want to know what you find helpful. I want to know if you are challenging some of these things and just like what your thoughts, questions, comments, concerns are. But yeah, thanks for your support and for listening, and can't wait to talk to you next week.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening. Diet Culture is co-produced by myself and my brother, Nick Lewis. You can keep up with what's going on with Diet Culture on my Instagram page at Dietitian Dani Cast. If you prefer to watch rather than just listen, check us out on YouTube, and we always love ratings and reviews if you haven't done so already. Thank you so much for your support, and can't wait to talk to you next week.